Let's spend 30 minutes with BMAI's 60-Minute Man. Who is he? You'll meet him coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at the Myrtle Beach Train Depot, right here in the heart of Myrtle Beach. We're focused on Beach Music Association International, and we're visiting with its co-founder and president, Harry Turner. Good morning, Harry.
How are you, buddy?
Great to
already been
get
out walking this morning.
I bet, early on. That's right, now at 7 a.m. on a Tuesday morning.
It's nice and cool. Absolutely.
Yeah, what a great opportunity. What about this train depot?
Oh,
this is amazing.
I think it's great, and what Jack Thompson and his cronies did to keep this thing from being demolished is just.
Right.
What a place. And I've been to several drop-ins here. I mean,
oh, yeah, sure.
Perfect.
Jack will be with us this Friday.
Oh, good.
To highlight what that was like when the bulldozer was coming up.
And he climbed up on it and stuff.
Oh, yeah, all these folks out here that have really made a difference. The All Aboard Committee. This place is beautiful. Folks ought to come and rent this out more often to have get-togethers. You can see everything. I mean, it's just incredible.
He'll probably tell you he wished he'd done the same thing when the Ocean Forest was demolished.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what spurred him saying, by gosh, this ain't going to happen.
Yeah, I will ask him about that on Friday. That's great. BMAI, a lot happening right now. Y'all had tremendously successful Beach Music Days again this May.
We really did. It's been really a great year for us. We've expanded. We're doing things, and we have contacts in other cities, Las Vegas, Pittsburgh, New York, Chicago, Atlanta.
Right.
We're working on getting we already did the first. It took place here in the Carolinas. We have another schedule for Pittsburgh, a Beach Music Meet Doo-Wop series.
Yeah.
We had Beach Music's Fantastic Shakers, and then Doo-Wop's The Skyliners, Since I Don't Have You, play at the Newberry Opera House up in Newberry on the 26th of January, something like that.
Great.
Tremendous success. And so many of these musics do have kinship, and yet they're kind of limited to their small areas of the country. Whereas if it's exposed, people realize, oh, I love this stuff. And that's what we're trying to do. It's South Carolina's official popular music.
Yes.
And it really is one of our great tourist attractions, if you want to say it that way.
Oh, yeah.
You think of attractions as being a building like this, but in reality there's a certain mystique and something about the Carolinas that beach music puts in the minds of people in a positive way, and they smile, they laugh, they want to dance. And it's part of what can help draw them here. So look at the SOS thing up at North Myrtle Beach.
Oh, yeah.
There are probably 10,000, 20,000 people between the two events every year. Well, actually, have more than two. But they come, and basically it is beach music and shagging. And there's just a specialness to all of that in the Carolinas, plus the beautiful Carolina lifestyle.
Oh, yeah.
And the coast here. And it's just, what a combination.
For you, Harry, and of course I'm sure a lot of folks think about this, and obviously we want to focus on BMAI and what Beach Music Association International is doing, but when we think about beach music, is there ever a debate as to what were some of the early songs or how they came up with the phrase beach music? Obviously for yourself, having taught a lot about music history and otherwise, just how did the term beach music come about?
Beach music is a combination of doo-wop, Motown, soul, the blues, good time rock and roll, oldies, American music. The British invasion stuff and after, that's never been a part of beach music. It's about American, basically black-based rhythm and blues. At the same time, other parts of the country were doing and loving and going to concerts and dancing to the same music.
Right.
Now, I'm going to give you two examples because it happened about the same time. Doo-wop. Doo-wop is hot. I mean, it's really hot. These PBS specials on doo-wop, which is nothing more than a lot of beach music. 60-Minute Man, the most popular song of all time, is a doo-wop song. And these doo-wop specials are the biggest shows in the history of public television. But doo-wop was not called doo-wop until late 60s, early 70s, something like that. Nor was beach music called beach music until about the same time.
Is that right?
Yeah, and what I try to explain to people is beach music, to people that don't know, the simplest way to explain it is beach music is that rhythm and blues music that you could listen and dance to when you came to the beach. Because if you lived in the larger cities, I lived in Greenville, large enough to bring in shows where you see these national artists performing these rhythm and blues hits.
Right.
But if you didn't live in Greenville, Charlotte, Columbia, Greensboro, or someplace like that, Raleigh, you wouldn't hear this kind of music on the radio or at these concerts.
Is that right?
Unless you had a chance to come down here, where the jukeboxes were full of this music. Plus, in the 60s, then the Beach Club opened up and brought in a lot of these entertainers, you see. So that's how it kind of came about. Then when you had the amalgam, basically speaking, you got to remember, original beach music, though, I think I may have told you this before, but it wasn't, you didn't just shag to it. The shag is the state dance of South Carolina, beach music's the official popular music. But beach music has a lot of songs that you didn't shag to. It was up-tempo, slow stuff. You know, we love the hugging and lovey-dovey stuff, you know.
Right.
But when the shag kind of regenerated itself in the late 70s through SOS and what have you, it became somewhat synonymous that beach music and the shag were the same thing, which really they aren't, because now they're shagging to a lot of non-beach music as well as beach music.
Right.
That's part of why we had to form that association. But the name and title beach music had been there for about, we formed it in the early 90s.
Right.
So it had been so called for almost 20 years, or maybe a little longer. You see. The biggest negative is we do have people that don't know, and we have to explain this. They think it's the Beach Boys, Jan and Dean, the Safaris, that West Coast beach sound, because of the exposure through Hollywood and TV out there and that kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah. So we have to make that delineation.
And what kind of music are they, the Beach Boys, for instance?
Well, believe it or not,
put them in?
The Beach Boys, in the earliest days, did some of this kind of music, the doo-wop R&B type sounds. Their influences were a lot of the black R&B groups, as well as, believe it or not, a big band type group called the Four Freshmen, you see. But what happened as they grabbed onto a gimmick, which was the surf thing,
right.
then they became basically a surfing band talking about, you know, singing about that kind of stuff rather than just singing songs themselves, you see.
Sure. That's very interesting. I bet that is a big misconception to get over.
Well, let me give you an example of something you may not know. I guess I'm digressing a little bit, but the Beach Boys had great harmony. They did a song called Little Surfer Girl, if you ever get a chance to hear it. The harmony is just beautiful. But let me tell you what they did, and it took it away from the original beach music sound that we love so much. A lot of what was so great about those groups back in the 50s and 60s were those great bass voices.
Right.
You can hear it now, the great harmonies that melded together. Well, the Beach Boys had a bass singer too, but their bass was really a baritone. He wasn't didn't have a deep bass voice. Now, what happened off of that is that basically with the success of the Beach Boys, because they were such a phenomenal success, the groups that then would copy them would not use a bass anymore, they'd use a baritone. The reason is that there is a perception, wrongly so, that if you got a real deep bass voice, you're an older group. So they're going after teenagers and sub-teen white females for the most part.
Interesting.
So you want to sound as young as you can, even though Frankie Lyman and the Teenagers, Why Do Fools Fall in Love, Jimmy Merchant, their bass singer, had this beautiful deep bass voice. So it was really a misnomer. But that's a little aside. But that was a little bit of the differentiation, because our beach music is basically the R&B groups and white groups too, that had those deep bass voices and the great harmonies and the great tenors and the whole 9 yards.
Very interesting, Harry. I'm glad you shared that. Of course, again, I know much of our focus is on the Beach Music Association International. Obviously, we wanted to talk a little about the Beach Music Days and what prompted the founding of those. And you highlighted the success of those. We also had very recently the loss of a true great performer. I know you were one of the 5 featured speakers at his funeral.
Yeah.
Share with viewers a little bit about Bill Pinkney and, of course, his funeral, which was held last month.
Well, Bill, of course, was the co-founder of the Drifters. He was 81 years old. And he was, the song he's most recognized for worldwide is White Christmas. The second best-selling version of White Christmas was, that's Bill singing bass lead. Be-doo, be-doo, dope, dope. I know you've heard it. It was also on the soundtrack of the movie Home Alone. It's kind of the theme song of that movie.
Right.
And it really revived interest in that sound. But Bill was, he was a trooper. He almost married Della Reese, Ruth Brown. He was quite the ladies' man, but always he was kind of the glue that held the original Drifters together. When the Drifters were fired in the late 50s because they wanted more of a say-so in the music and how they got paid, the royalties and what have you. You know, back then they didn't have much leverage, and the record company people just fired them and hired another group totally, who went on to have other hit records under the name of the Drifters too. But Bill kept that original sound, that original group going. Of course, he was living in New York at the time.
Is that right?
He's from Sumter,
But he still
Dalzell, right
kept
outside
deep,
Sumter.
right,
Yeah.
right.
And eventually, after a couple of years in Atlanta, he moved back and spent the last, say, 25, 30 years of his life
Right.
back in his home state of South Carolina.
Right.
And through that time, Bill arguably became the most well-loved entertainer in South Carolina. A couple of governors have named him the official ambassador of music before
Is
he passed.
that right?
Absolutely.
I didn't know that.
And Bill was a member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Rhythm and Blues Hall of Fame, the Beach Music Hall of Fame, the Doo-Wop Hall of Fame, the Vocal Group Hall of Fame, the Group Harmony Hall of Fame, the Gospel Hall of Fame.
Wow.
He got letters of commendation from Bill Clinton, Nelson Mandela, people like this. He received a doctorate from Coastal Carolina University, an honorary doctorate of fine arts and letters, something of that nature.
Right.
He was just one of these people, but he was also a giving person. When the mayor of Sumter spoke at his funeral, his voice cracked because Bill was Sumter. I mean, Bill, not just the famous entertainer, but he did things like he bought a school bus in his 70s now. All right, he bought a school bus. You know why? So he could take the old folks around to shop and go to the doctors. And he personally, in his 70s, I said, Bill, what do you do? Well, somebody's got to take the old folks around. I said, well, Bill, you in your 70s. Well, I know, but I can get around and they can't. I mean, that's the kind of person he was.
That's tremendous.
A policeman in Sumter was shot and killed in the line of duty. And they wanted to do something really special for his funeral, because, you know, when you have a policeman killed, it's always a really big deal at the funeral. So they called Bill, and he was in Los Angeles at the time. Told him what happened. Bill canceled his date there, flew himself and the Drifters back, sang for free at this funeral, and then of course flew back to L.A. or didn't cancel or postpone for the rest of the engagement.
Wow.
And he just did these selfless things, you know, all the time. And see, the irony is, he was always part of why we formed our associations. He was with us right from the very start.
Is that right?
Well, oh yeah.
With you and Hilda, Billy, and Representative Bubba Snow.
He and Maurice Williams were the two other entertainers so much a part of it.
Right.
But Bill was working on celebrating his 82nd birthday. Our association helped him celebrate his birthday every year.
Right.
And I'd been by to see him that Friday night before he died on Wednesday at the Alabama Theater. He's standing ovations. I mean, his usual great show.
And great shots in Hilda's column and around town. Yeah.
And the ironies were that I was going to be seeing him that afternoon to talk about his birthday while he was here in some hotel room in Myrtle Beach. But Hilda, because she has trouble getting around, as you know, she said, Harry, I'd like to go see the Coastal Drifters Platters. Do you mind taking me to, because she doesn't like, especially at night, doesn't like to drive.
Right.
And so what I did, I said, all right, I'll do it. So, because I always go at least once a year to see him anyway, because I had represented Bill all those years too.
Sure.
So I went and got Hilda and had a great time that night, and I rescheduled to see him going through on the way to the upstate, to Columbia and upstate in Sumter on Monday at his home. So I'm so glad I did, because not only did I see his next to his last performance, but I also visited with him at his home that Monday before he died on Wednesday.
Wow.
Talking about his birthday.
Preparing for his birthday party.
And I want to pass on to your viewers. He always gets these standing ovations. I mean, these people just loved him.
Right.
And, you know, I said, well, Bill, Friday night you did your usual thing. You got 4 or 5 standing ovations. And he says, Harry, he says, I think the people love me, don't they? I said, well, Bill, I think they do. He says, do you know why? I said, well, I think I have an idea. He said, well, I'll tell you why. He says, because they know I love them.